Hey, what's happening, guys? How are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to discuss the importance of backwards compatibility to Nintendo's future. There are, of course, a lot of hot button topics going around out there about Nintendo's hardware future, what might happen in 2023 or 2024, if their next hardware revision, upgrade, or next-gen console is maybe right around the corner. And obviously, I always love to bring this topic up. I've actually been touching on it a lot over the course of my past few videos, and I want to continue to discuss a lot of different elements as we get into the beginning of 2023, because this really is a year that I'm banking on to see this new hardware. I really think before the year is over, we're going to know about it, see it, Nintendo will confirm it. I'm even putting a bit of a chance on us even playing it, like maybe it could release before the end of the year. I'm less sure about that, but I'm pretty darn sure we will see the thing. And so with that comes all of these conversations that you've seen on my YouTube channel, you're starting to see on other people's YouTube channels, we're seeing all over the place on the internet and on Twitter and whatnot, about what Nintendo may or may not need to do with their next generation hardware, what people want out of it. And so I really want to focus, like I said in the intro, on backwards compatibility, because it is a big focal point for a lot of us when we think about Nintendo's first hardware that will succeed the Nintendo Switch. Even if it's called like a Switch 2 or a Super Switch or whatever their next generation leap in tech and console will be, backwards compatibility, man, it's important, it is vital and key, in my opinion, to Nintendo's success with their next piece of hardware. In a lot of ways, this kind of relates to a lot of other things that people talk about when they talk about what we need or maybe we'll see from Nintendo's next hardware, which is the fact that a lot of folks either want or expect for Nintendo to just make a more powerful Switch with almost maybe no differences. How dare you? Basically, it's a hybrid console. It might still use Joy-Cons and the tech within the Joy-Cons. You're going to switch it to your TV. You're going to take it on the go, but it's just going to have way better graphics. That's what a lot of people want and, again, expect. I don't even know if I would say 50-50. It might even be too early for me, of all people, to even know what I expect them to do, as much as I've been kind of predicting that this year we'll see their next hardware thing. I mean, there is a phenomenal chance they do another hybrid, but I also think, per a recent conversation, maybe Nintendo feels like there's too many other companies starting to do the same thing, so maybe they want to continue to differentiate themselves. That comes with a lot of risks, though. So the hybrid thing does have a great chance at happening. So in that conversation where a lot of people just want the same thing the Switch is, with just better graphics and more power and newer games that the current Switch can't play, that's where we start to look at how Nintendo would or could treat backwards compatibility. Whatever they do, if it's just a home console, if it's just a handheld, if it's another Switch, or even if it's some other weird VR crazy thing that has gloves and whatever crazy Nintendo idea we couldn't even predict right now, whatever it is, in my opinion, and I think a lot of you are going to agree with this, there is no doubt in my mind that backwards compatibility with Switch cartridges as they exist now absolutely is a must. This transition from the Switch era into whatever their next piece of hardware is going to be is so important for Nintendo. This is one of their most crucial eras we've ever seen. Because as we all know, Nintendo has mostly had a lot of ups and successes in their history, but they have had a couple of downs and a couple of things that haven't done as well as they could or should have. And given what happened going from the mega successful Wii to the not successful Wii U to the mega successful Switch again, if I could say all these successes in a row, you know, when you look at that kind of up and down trajectory, Nintendo does not want to go back into the negative again. They don't want to have a dip following the Switch. So they need to treat it very carefully. Plenty of other people have even started to talk about this as well, including John Linneman from Digital Foundry and his kind of opinion piece and his inside stuff that he shared last week. He talked about how Nintendo is probably treating this very carefully when they make their decisions into their next hardware, which is where maybe playing it safe with just another hybrid device makes the most sense. And the good news is, if they do that, then I think backwards compatibility with Switch cartridges becomes almost a 100% lock. When we look at the success of the Nintendo Switch and how many units it sold and all of the great games and the incredibly good library that it has and how many of those games have already sold, if Nintendo were to release another device, Switch 2 or not, or whatever it would be, that doesn't just play your Switch cartridges, all this collection of physical Switch cartridges that most of us have, because Switch is a very physical heavy console by comparison to PlayStation and Xbox. We have to remember that. I think a much, much larger percentage of Switch owners are collecting physical games compared to the other two guys. I don't really know that, but I'm willing to bet that that's the truth. And so no matter what that percentage is, tons of people have Switch cartridges. And this next device, I don't care what you plug it into to play it. If we can take our current collection of Switch cartridges and just plug those bad boys into that thing and play them, Nintendo's got a mega runaway hit right away. There's no doubt in my mind people will continue to play it and just love it. Backwards compatibility has been a growing trend and a growing desire over the last few generation cycles and decades and whatnot. And in the digital side, we've seen, Microsoft and Sony attempt different versions of backwards compatibility. Nintendo has not succeeded in that front. They definitely have dropped the ball on the digital side. Unfortunately, this next console could be a great opportunity for them to remedy that by allowing physical and digital purchases to just roll over to the new thing. And heaven forbid they do something great like bring the virtual console back, but that's a whole different conversation. But Sony and Microsoft have made attempts to make digital collections from Xbox and 360 and PS2 and PS3 and PS4 games available. I think most of us feel that Microsoft has handled it much, much better than Sony. I personally do not love how Sony has handled things, and I think it's too expensive to access what they are offering from PS3 and PS2. But it is what it is. At least they've made attempts. Nintendo really hasn't since they had the Virtual Console back on the Wii and the 3DS and the Wii U. I think it's worth looking at how Nintendo has succeeded, though, on the physical side of things so unbelievably well in the past. And this even relates to a tweet I made a week or two ago that got a pretty good amount of traction. And I referenced the fact, I was just thinking about Nintendo and gaming and the Switch and the next console, like I tend to do like any person. And I was really just reminiscing on the fact that when they released the Wii and the Wii U, Nintendo did some amazing consumer-friendly things with those two pieces of hardware that were physically done, physical changes and additions and components that came with those consoles, the Wii and Wii U, that added so much backwards compatibility value to the consumer that it was out of this world, and I honestly think to this day are still the most consumer-friendly physical things we've ever seen a video game company do. And that is, with the Wii, they basically built like the front end of a GameCube into the Wii. That thing played CD and DVD sized discs, but it could actually take your GameCube mini discs and also play that disc, so you could play physical GameCube games in a CD-sized disc drive, and they had 4 GameCube controller ports and memory cards built into the freaking side of the Nintendo Wii. I mean, it might seem like something that isn't a big deal because it was so long ago and we've moved so far beyond that and so much of us are playing digitally nowadays. But if you really just stop and ruminate on that for a minute and you look at pictures or look at your own Wii, if you even have a Wii in your house, and just flip that thing open and look at it. It's insane and so freaking cool that one of the biggest companies in the world did that to allow physical GameCube games from their last generation and controllers from their last generation to just plug right into the side of that. No one in their right mind today would ever do that or think about it. But back then, the way the video game industry was and things weren't very digital, and just the way Nintendo was so much more consumer friendly at the time compared to how they are now, it was an incredible, amazing thing that they did, and I think that is so cool. When it comes to the Wii U, they built it not only to work with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck controllers, which were the prior generation at that time, and it also played Wii games, but they even included the Wii's sensor bar in with the Wii U. So you bought a Wii U, you got a last generation component, the sensor bar, right out of the box, and then so many people had Wii games and Wiimotes that we were able to just use it with that console the day we brought it home. Like, another amazingly consumer-friendly thing to do. And again, these are all physical components. That's what I want to drive home to you guys, that it wasn't like stuff that they built into their digital infrastructure or their storefronts or whatnot. They built these things and shipped these things with these pieces of hardware to make this all possible. Of course, on the handheld side, Nintendo has done this as well. The original DS models came with like a a Game Boy Advance slot to be able to play Game Boy Advance games in it, right? So Nintendo, especially in like the 2000s and up into the Wii U in 2012, were really great about making sure that backwards compatibility was a front and center component to all of their new hardware releases. Now, to their credit, moving from the Wii U and the Wii generation and the disc-based media generation into the Switch, it just wasn't possible the same way. So I don't think that they actively were like, we don't care about backwards compatibility anymore. They just made a new device that used a different media, Switch cartridges, that made it impossible to put Wii and Wii U discs into it, and you sure as heck ain't putting GameCube discs into it, and you're not plugging GameCube controllers, or playing your Wii U gamepad on your Switch. It just wasn't possible. They went in a different direction, and so that's fine. But now, getting back to the main point here, when we think about what they're going to do with their next device, I'll say it again, I don't care what it is or what it plugs into, hybrid or not, if we can play our Switch games, physical cartridges, and the digital downloads that we've purchased on that thing, it is going to be so key to making sure that this transition from Switch into the next thing that I think a lot of us know they're probably nervous about is going to be a massive success. And again, you could argue that the need for backwards compatibility and the need for Switch cartridges to work on this next device kind of makes us feel like, well, then in that case, they're just going to make a Switch 2 and it's just going to be more powerful and it's going to play next-gen games and then also play your old Switch games. So I honestly agree with that. I mean, the honest-to-goodness line of thinking is that just a more powerful, better Switch is probably what they're going to do. Now, it is still worth considering, to kind of wrap up here, and even building off my last conversation where I mentioned there's Steam Decks and Aya Neos, and probably more companies will come out with hybrid consoles themselves and hybrid PCs. So Nintendo's individuality in the hybrid space is basically lost at this point. They're no longer the only hybrid game in town. So that could aid in them wanting to do something different to differentiate themselves from the competition, even if they make the best hybrid device, and even though they have some of the best games and their Nintendo first-party games, yes, that sells their devices too, but Nintendo has always valued their individuality, and that, you can't dispute it, is gone. With Steam Decks and Aya Neos and things like that, the individuality and uniqueness of Nintendo's hardware, the Switch, is officially just gone forever, okay? So not only might that convince them to change up what they're doing with their next hardware, it's also the fact that no matter what Nintendo likes to keep us on our toes, they like to introduce new ideas. Yes, there's conversations about VR patents and things going around out there. I don't know that I see them going right into VR, this year or next year, but I guess we never know. The point is that as much as it probably does make the most sense for Nintendo to just make another more powerful, better Switch that hopefully is backwards compatible, there is the chance that they don't make another Switch. Whether it's because there are other companies copying their idea, whether it's because they just like changing it up every time they release new hardware, anything could happen. And so I'll finish by going back to the main kind of thesis here. Even if they just make a home console box that sits under your TV, and again, you put on gloves and boots and a chest plate and VR glasses, and you start doing these things to play our video games, and this is how we're playing Mario in the future, whatever it is that they do, they love that stuff, right? But even if they do that, as long as we can take, and I know I've said it several times, I'm going to end with it one final time. We can take our Switch cartridges, we can plug them in, and with a regular controller, just sit back and do this, play Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild and Luigi's Mansion 3 and Smash Bros. Ultimate and all these different games, Animal Crossing, New Horizons, Pokemon. If we can do that with our Switch games, Nintendo's going to sell a boatload of these. If Nintendo makes a pretty big boneheaded decision, in my opinion, and whatever their next thing isn't backwards compatible with Switch games, and we can't transfer our eShop purchases over to that through our Nintendo account, I mean, I'm not going to say that they're doomed from the start, because Nintendo is never really doomed from the start, but it's a really rocky way to start off your new hardware. So time will tell if Nintendo is aware enough and smart enough to realize they have to give us backwards compatibility with the Switch, or if they're going to pull the bad and dumb side of Nintendo and make a huge mistake and say, too bad, so sad, you have to start your library all over again. But I'm going to err on the side of optimism. I personally believe they will make their next hardware backwards compatible.